Welcome all of you for this particular session. This will not be taking more than 5 to 6 classes. The contents, I think, Zubair, you have shared it already.
Yes, I have already shared with them. With you,
Okay. Okay. So anyway, what I'll do is I will do day-by-day contents declaration. So I'll talk about, today what I'm going to teach you. And based on that, we'll do the labs. Um, and similarly, we continue till 5 to 6 classes. All right, so going ahead, Palo Alto, before I start with Palo Alto, our next-gen firewall, make sure that you know certain basic terms, right? So what I do is I like to discuss something like that, common network security terms. By the way, I don't use presentations and all because it makes our life boring, okay? So common network security terms that we can use or think of are, something like, asset, right? Something like vulnerability, something like exploit, threat, attack, risk, right? Some sort of, countermeasures. So those are, common security terms that we'll be experiencing, right? So, you guys can discuss with me. So what do you understand by the term asset, guys? Just a liner to make things quite interesting. What is the meaning of an asset for an organization?
Data.
Okay. So asset could be anything. It could be data, it could be physical or logical resources, right? It could be all sort of hardwares. Your buildings, the entire building is an asset, right? The vehicles that is inside the campus, that is an asset. Machines that is running, your PCs, your cables, anything that is inside the campus becomes an asset, right? If out of those asset, if something gets stolen, it is a loss, right? It is a loss of a particular asset. So our job is to actually, provide security to protect the asset, right? Now, what kind of security we are providing? We are providing logical security, okay? So to protect your data as an asset, your data in transit, your data in rest, so whatever data that is moving around, so that data security we are going to provide using firewalls, right? Vulnerability, could be defining a weakness in a system, right? So if your devices has got, if your network has got some sort of weakness, so your device or network is told to be vulnerable, right? So if your network is weak, that is called as a vulnerable. So we can find vulnerability by doing a lot of pen testing. So if you heard about engineers or ethical hackers, so what they do is they do pen testing of a particular network and figure it out that whether what resources are vulnerable or they're subject to attacks by the hackers, and they find out some mitigation solutions for providing the asset, right? Securing the asset. Similarly, exploit. Exploit is basically, I can say it's a method or it's a tool, right? What your hackers uses to target a system or target a network, right? So there are a lot of tools that is available in the market. One of the famous tool is Kali Linux. There are a lot of tools available inside Kali that ethical hacker can use it for testing purpose and find out what kind of vulnerabilities are present inside a particular network, right? So threats are a huge thing. You think about viruses, right? So virus, your spyware, right? If you think about those terms, hackers, Trojan, identity theft. So all those terms that you see, they are part of your threat. So anything that is surrounding these terms are a threat for an organization, right? So our job is to mitigate threat, reduce the existence of a threat, reducing the possibility of a threat that could, attack us. So attack, very simple term. It's a method by using some sort of tools the hackers uses to attack your network, right? So there are different kinds of attacks that you might have encountered, right? So DOS attack, DDoS attack, Trojan attack, ransomware. There are a lot of different types of attacks. So I'm not going to discuss everything out of it, bits and pieces. So what you can do is, take out these particular terms, Google them one by one and just go through it one by one, right? Risk. So risk is basically a potential loss or a compromise or a damage, if your asset is actually encountering. Okay, so that could be risk. So risk is actually valued along with your asset, right? To find out the different countermeasures uh, to mitigate those kind of threats, or to mitigate, the value of a threat, right? So I mean, there is something called a circle of risk. I mean, you guys have heard about this. So just Google it once again, circle of risk. So you'll find, these terms revolving in this particular, module, like circle of risk. So in circle of risk, you'll find, threats, you'll find attack. So if there is a, possibility of threat, there could be possibility of attack, there could be possibility of vulnerability, then there is possibility of risk. Then you do countermeasures to, figure it out, that how to um, mitigate those kind of, threats and protect your asset, right? That could be compromised. So the whole idea is, if you can just Google this particular term, circle of risk, all those elements will pop up and you can just go through it one by one, right? So if anybody asks you what are the different types of, threats that we can have, so this is quite important for your interviews if you actually go for it. So this different types of threats, you can just Google them. So you'll find, worms, right? You'll find virus. So these terms, you need to have a definition of it, right? Trojan, ransomware. Zubair, you can add some point if I miss it. Adware,
Sure.
Spyware. So those are the different terms, your interviewers might ask you that your organization, I mean, spam, right? See, right? Phishing, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So those terms are really important, guys. It feels boring, I know, but important in terms of interviews is considered. So you must know what is the difference between worms versus virus, or how a Trojan is different than a virus, regular virus. So make sure that you know how to differentiate those, and with a one-liner definition, you should be able to answer to the interviewer. So just Google it; you'll be getting your answers easily. Right. So my job is not to go with this particular terms and teach you one by one what is the thing, right? And also just in attack, you have two attack that is very common. One is denial of service attack and distributed denial of service attack. Just read through that and also read through something like what is botnet. Okay. And what else? I mean, mm, yeah, the DOS, DDoS, botnet. There is one more. I'm just not recollecting that word. Yeah, zombies, right? So ensure that you just also Google it and just have a one-liner, at least two-liner definition for those particular terms, and they are quite important for interviews. Now regarding common networking terms, I've told you what is that. Then comes your, I think regarding firewall, all of you know what is a firewall, but just to make things complete, yeah. Firewall technologies. So I'll just brush you up. First, what is the meaning of firewall technologies and what are the things that comes in firewall technologies? So what is a firewall, guys? Can anyone define it? What do you mean by firewall? A one-liner definition would sound me good.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically the firewall is a intermediate between the open internet and the secure internet. It's work like a man in the middle.
Okay. So basically, firewall is a security device. I'll just, and this notes, whatever I'll type, it will be shared to you. So no need to, you guys should not worry about, typing or taking the notes from your end. I'll share this PDF files or PPTs, whatever I have. So firewall is basically it's a security device. It is used to stop, or mitigate, I can say, any unauthorized access to a network, right? So this is the basic job of a firewall, right? So the traffic that is allowed by a firewall should be present in its security rule or policy. So there must be some sort of policy or rule that the firewall must have in order to, process a particular traffic or to either allow or deny a particular traffic, right? So there are different types of firewalls. So firewall can be hardware based, right? It can be software based, right? It could be VM based, or it could be cloud based, right? So cloud based is again a VM based, right? But normally if they differentiate, the different types of firewalls that we have, these are the differentiation. It can be hardware based firewall, like in physical appliance, software based firewall, right? And VM based firewall. So software based is basically, think about your antiviruses that we install, right? Your Windows operating system, your Linux operating system, your Mac OSs, they have the inbuilt firewall into the OS itself, right? So they have a software based firewall, like Windows Defender, imagine that, right? So VM-based firewalls are, the firewalls that you have a hardware appliance. If you have the VM image for that, and when you install it, that becomes a VM-based firewall. So the thing that we'll be practicing today with Palo Alto, it is a VM-based, right? Either you run with EVE-NG or with GNS3 VM or with regular VMware workstation. I mean, they are my VM-based firewall. Likewise, you've got cloud-based. So the firewall that is present inside the cloud data centers, providing the security of your cloud infrastructure. That is a cloud-based firewall, right? As simple as that. Now, there are actually, what do you say, mm, 4 generations of firewall. Okay, so that has been encountered. So first gen firewall, I mean, if you have uh, the first gen firewalls are known as packet filters. Okay, so if you have anytime encounter with this word called as packet filters, they're my first gen firewall. So basically they used to work with layer 3, and they used to work with IP addresses, and based on access control list, I mean, it has to either allow a traffic or deny a traffic based on the access control policies what you write. So it was just legacy. Nowadays, this is not used anywhere. So you go with second gen firewall. So in second gen firewall, I mean, the second gen firewall, they added with application layer, right? So application layer was added. So basically, the firewall could do filtering of traffic from all the way from layer 2 to layer 7, right? So it could understand, what is an application protocol. Like, for example, I hope you know what is OSI model. So nothing to discuss too much about it, but just as a completeness. So you know that there are layer 7, then we have layer 4, the important ones, right? Layer 3 and layer 2 in OSI model. So you have got all application protocols that sits here. Layer 4, you have, two big daddies that take care about application traffic, that is TCP and UDP, that works on the port numbers. So you have TCP UDP port numbers over here. Layer 3, you have the IP header. So IP or IPv4 or V6, right? And in layer 2, either you work with Ethernet or with frame relay or with ATM or with packet over power over Ethernet solutions, or with MPLS VPNs. So there are a lot of technologies that works with layer 2. So any data that works on layer 7 will have an approach of top to bottom, as a traffic flow mechanism. So application, for example, HTTP traffic, let us say if you are sending, that will have HTTP header, and HTTP works on TCP. So TCP will add its header. Basically, it's port numbers that we counter for. Then we add the layer 3 header, say example IPv4. Then we'll have layer 2 header, and the traffic goes out. So if a firewall, let us say it is there in the middle, and it is to inspect a particular traffic that is encountering it, so it will read the traffic from layer 2. It has got the capability of reading the traffic from layer 2 to all the way to layer 7. Right, so reading Ethernet header contents, V4, V6 contents, your application, protocol port number contents, and as well as the application layer itself. Right, so those are my second generation firewall, but a lot of advancement was made, and this advancement was taken further into third gen firewall. Right, so third gen firewall, when you add, they had a feature known as stateful firewall. right? So stateful firewall is basically what you need to know or what you need to have in your company, right? So basically, what is the meaning of a stateful firewall is, let us say if I got a firewall, any firewall, doesn't matter, right? But it is a stateful firewall. I say SF, and let us say you have, two interface that connects it, right? And this is basically a layer 3 interface. So you add an IP address there. So this is my layer 3 interface, whatever IP, say it is 10.11.11.0/24 network, right? From there, let us say I give an IP of .10 here. And this is my, let us say 192.1.20.0/24 network. And from there, I gave .10 here. So the firewall, just like a normal regular router, it will have its routing table, it will maintain its routing table, forwarding information based fifth table, right? So in the routing table, it will have two routes as directly connected. I mean, one is your 10 dot and one is your 192 dot, right? And it knows that which is the interface. For example, this is Ethernet 0/1, this is Ethernet 0/2. It will know from which interface this network is there connected. So now what happens is when a packet is trying to travel from, let us say, one interface to other interface, by default, the firewall will not allow the traffic. So any, inter-routing, right? Inter-routing is not allowed by the firewall by default. So you need to have a security policy, right, to allow this traffic to move across. Okay. So I'll teach you more about it, nothing to worry, but as of now, just have the basic thing clear that the firewall does not allow any interface, packet routing. So 10.11 cannot talk to 192.120 and vice versa. So what we need to do is write a security policy to allow this traffic from, one network to other network. Then only it is possible. So let's say I've got a security policy, right? And security policy says, yes, 10.11 can talk to 192. And let us say this policy says, I'm allowing, let us say HTTP traffic, right? So say now there is an HTTP traffic from a user that is trying to go outside. So there is a user, say 10 dot, there's a user over here. So 10.11.11.1/24 is his IP address. And he's sending, some HTTP traffic towards the outside world. So how the traffic will look like is HTTP at layer 7. Then you add your layer 4 content, that is TCP parameters. So you add source port number, so which is basically random port number, anything which is 1024 above. So it say it is 1039. And HTTP well-known destination port number is 80. Then you add the layer 3 header. Basically, you add the source IP, destination IP. Say source IP is the user IP 10.11.11.1. Destination IP is somewhere in the world of internet it is going. Say it is 200.1.1.1. And then you add the layer 2 header with a source MAC and a destination MAC, right? And then the traffic goes to the firewall, let's say. And the firewall receives this particular packet, it will check that, hey, do I have a security policy that is going to allow this particular packet? The policy says yes, you can. Once the policy says yes, that means it is a stateful firewall. What it will do is it will maintain the state of this particular traffic. So there is a table called as a session table in case of Palo Alto, right? There's a table called as a session table. In session table, you'll have this connection information. So you'll know that 10.11.11.1, right, has sent a traffic to 200.1.1.1. And when the traffic was going, the source port number of the traffic was 1039. Destination port number was 80. This is the traffic condition, right? So what happens in the state table is it will have the return entry of that particular traffic, right? So this is the outbound traffic. And for the same traffic, the return entry is automatically kept in the state table. So basically what will happen is in the state table, you'll have the traffic not in this direction, right? The traffic will be in this direction. That means the state table will say that I will be allowing the return traffic from 200.1.1.1, having this is the source and this is the destination, right? So a stateful firewall is always, considered to keep, the states of the sessions. So whatever traffic, you come from ASA background. Now ASA used to keep sessions for your TCP UDP based traffic, but in case of Palo Alto, whatever traffic you send, it could be ICMP, could be FTP, could be anything, TCP UDP or non-TCP non-UDP traffic. If it goes from one interface to other interface, I'll have a session table for that. Okay, so basically this is gonna be called as a stateful firewall. So whatever traffic that goes out, the same traffic can come back in. And for that, I should not have a security policy. Okay, so only one security policy will allow me for my stateful nature to work. All right, and what is the best part of it? You will see when I talk about zones and all those things, the best part of stateful firewall is, it will not allow the traffic from outside. So this is my LAN, which is called as a trusted network. So this is my outside interface, which is called as the untrusted network, generally because it goes towards my public internet. So generally, because of this stateful nature, what happens is, you allow the traffic from inside to outside based on a security policy, but you don't allow any explicit traffic from outside to inside, right? So if anybody from outside it is trying to reach inside, I mean, those traffics will be automatically blocked, right? Because you will not have any policies. Generally you don't do that, right? Generally you don't allow any policies that allows automatically the traffic from outside to inside, so that any malicious traffic can come up and contact any inside devices. So this is your stateful firewall basic stuff, right? And one more thing, that is stateless. I mean, the second gen firewall was basically stateless firewall, so it will not mention or keep any state table information. That is the reason it is became legacy. And nowadays we have a next gen firewall. So after third gen, I mean, nowadays all these firewall are called as a next gen firewall or fourth gen firewall, how do you say it, right? Next gen firewall, I mean, they have got all kinds of features called as an IPS features, right? Along with stateful stateful features. So you'll see that there are a lot of features that your Palo Alto provides you, so that it becomes an next gen firewall. So one of the features that Palo Alto has all the features of telling the firewall that, hey, I'm stateful, I can inspect the traffic from layer 2 to layer 7. I can read Ethernet header, IP header. I can understand TCP UDP parameters. I can understand application contents and everything. But generally, why it is called as next gen? The reason being, it has got some 3 services. Palo Alto actually got 3 services, right? Because of which it became next gen firewall. Okay. So you will see that, I mean, the important things are this: content ID, app ID or application identity or identifier, right? And one is your user ID. So because of this 3 main element, right, that your Palo Alto firewall has as a feature, it is called as a next gen firewall, right? So content ID, basically all your IPS features that it can inspect for a particular traffic when it is moving from one network to other network or one interface to other interface, right? For example, if the traffic has got any sort of viruses, right? If the traffic has got any sort of threats, and I'll discuss more about it, right? So if the traffic is processing some sort of threats or virus, I mean, it can detect that by using this content ID feature, right? Application ID, where it can work with a lot of applications, for example, Facebook, right, Twitter. So wherever you are trying to go, right? For example, any application that you are custom application that you can create, right? So custom app, so it can understand the signatures of those applications and find out that they are my integrated applications or not, and based on that it will take a decision, right? Likewise, user ID, I mean, it will authenticate a right user to access the network, and a right user to use the right systems through which it can access the outside network. For example, if you have a LAN over here, right, and if you've got a user over here, let's say if this user's I've told Palo Alto that, hey, I mean, this is John, right, and this is Bob. So allow John and Bob, right, to send traffic towards the internet. So that is security policy. So which is saying that if there is an HTTP traffic going from inside to outside, and if the traffic is going from John and Bob, you then only allow it, otherwise drop all HTTP traffic, right? So allow HTTP traffic only from John and Bob. So this is based on user ID. And also you can go very deep. I mean, you can say that if John is using, Windows 10, having this particular antivirus inside it, then only allow the traffic to go out. Otherwise, don't allow it. So you can be very, very granular in terms of, writing the security policy with respect to user ID. So because of these features, I mean, the main 3 features, content ID, app ID, user ID, it is called as a next gen firewall. So I hope it is clear. Let me know if there is anything that you want to add. You guys are there?
Yeah, Mr. G.
Yeah,
Okay. Clear, right?
yeah.
Okay. So there are multiple vendors. I mean, when you think about firewall vendors, there are multiple vendors that we have. I mean, you know that, right? Name it. Cisco. What else? Juniper, right? Palo Alto. I mean, Checkpoint, Fortinet, right? Sonic Wall, like that. So you can just Google it. So common vendors are those that you actually find out in the market. And by the way, I mean, if you do not know, Palo Alto is developed from the source codes of Checkpoint. Okay, so basically, the developer of Checkpoint joined in Palo Alto as the Palo Alto's chief engineer. Okay, so he made the Palo Alto firewall. So initially, he developed Checkpoint firewall. All right. So basically, I've told you regarding what is stateless, what is packet filtering firewall, just inspecting layer 3, uh, and all those stuff. So you'll find some different types of firewall. So one second. So types of firewall, if you think, we have packet filter firewall. We have got stateless firewall. We have got stateful firewall. Then we have got personal firewall, right? And we have got what do you say, web application firewall, right? So basically, I mean, these are the different types of firewall. If anybody asks you, you can just again Google them and ensure that you know the basic terms of it. Next thing, I mean, there is one more important thing that I will teach you, not today, but mostly in the coming classes. Yeah. So Palo Alto has got deployment modes, right? So when you take a particular firewall, you can deploy the firewall in different modes, right? So there are different modes that you have. So basically, most of the time you will be going with layer 3 deployment mode. Okay, so where all the interfaces of your firewall is in layer 3, it works with IP. And also there is layer 2 mode. So you allow the firewall to work with VLANs and all those stuff. Then we have got virtual wire, or normally we call this as a vWire mode, tap mode, right? So we'll talk about all those stuff, right? The important ones are this. So we'll talk about this stuff in Palo Alto deployment scenario when it comes up in the picture. But most of the time, I mean, you will be actually going with your, what do you say, layer 3 mode, right? That's it. I mean, if you hear the term called as anything called as UTM, sometimes WAF, then also you have got one term called as a UTM, Unified Threat Manager, right? So basically, it is again the concept of next gen firewall, nothing else. So basically, you add layer 3, layer 4 features along with IPS features. So it is called as a UTM based firewall. So any firewalls nowadays, they are actually UTM based firewalls. All right. So now regarding your Palo Alto, if you think about it, so Palo Alto is basically, you can just give a quick intro. So basically, it is a company which is based on California. It's a company which is based in California, okay, in US, and I mean, what do you say? There's the name of the person is Nir Zook. So Nir Zook is basically the former engineer of, what do you say, is the main developer. So if anybody asks you who is Nir Zook, I mean, is a developer of your Checkpoint and Palo Alto codes. Okay, he's one of the chief engineer over there. And Palo Alto is present over more than 50 plus countries. All right, and you have got 24/7 support as well. So this is one of the important thing. So when you buy a Palo Alto as a firewall, I mean, the support is 24/7. for the features that for the licenses that we actually buy. And it has won the best firewall award. I mean, 8 to 9 times in a row, if I'm not sure. Yeah, 8 times, 8 times in a row. Won the best. What do you say? Or I can say leader in Gartner, right? So it is basically, there's a Gartner Magic Quadrant chart which gets populated every year. I mean, based on different companies, different technologies. So they rate it, right? Who are the leaders, who are the niche players, and so on. So you can just Google it. You'll find out the different Gartner reports. So 8 times in a row, Palo Alto was the winner, or it was the leader. What else? I mean, Palo Alto is basically deployed with, many vendors are using it. I'll not name which all companies are not using it, right? So this presence is existence. I mean, extensive presence is there in the market. So regarding certification, guys, when you think about any course, you think about certification. So the certification is PCNSE that you do it. It is basically, I think nowadays it is testing you on PAN-OS 9, right? And it is, I think it's $160, if I'm not wrong. So $160, cert value. The fees that you pay, it's a Pearson VUE based exam. And what else? I mean, it is, the passing score is basically 70%, right? So you need to score 70%, and there are close to 75 to 80 questions that we'll be getting. And the duration is, I think, 80 minutes. 80 minutes, yeah, 80 minutes for English speaking or 30 minutes for non-English speaking. So this is 80 minutes duration. And you'll be getting close to 75 questions. So know this in advance, it is always good. And the certificate is valid for 2 years. All right. So if you're planning for certification, this is the one. You can go for it. And there is no simulators, or there is no, it's always like multiple choice questions. There is no drag and drop. There is no lab things that you'll be performing. It is all MCQs. So it is one of the great things. Now, Palo Alto, I mean, the Palo Alto as a firewall, right? It has got a unique feature called as, SP3, right? It has got an SP3 feature. So what is the meaning of SP3 feature? It is called a single pass parallel processing. Okay, single pass parallel processing. Because of this feature, I mean, it is quite unique in terms of your control plane processing, your data plane processing, your management plane traffic processing. So it uses this feature called a single pass parallel processing as a feature, right? So if anybody asks you in the interview, so ensure that you just know these things. So what it can do is, if I just draw it, just a second. So if you have a this Palo Alto firewall, right? And the traffic is, let us say, moving from inside to outside, from trust network to untrust network, let's say. So it does not need multiple packets, right, of a same traffic to analyze multiple contents of it, right? So if a single packet is traveling, the single packet contains all the information from layer 2 to layer 7, correct? Now, based on the security policy that you configure on the Palo Alto firewall, it needs just one packet, right, to understand, what it should do with that particular packet, whether it should be allowing it, dropping it, and all the stuff, right? So what it has is, I mean, it has got couple of plane. One is called as the control plane, and one is called as the data plane. Right, so control plane is where your management traffic sits. So basically, control plane processor, it takes care about the management. So the administrator who logs into the firewall, doing SSH or doing web GUI, the management interface is managed by the control plane processor. And there is a data plane processor, separate processor is there for data plane. it actually manages three things. One is your networking part. So networking, you have got multiple stuff, right? So routing table, your ACLs, your NAT, right? So all this networking stuff is maintained by data plane processor, plus your security services like your IPS and IDS services generally, right? Your security policy that you write. So all those things are maintained by data plane processor. And we have got one more that is called as a content ID inspection. So content ID is basically, I mean, what I meant to say you is, data plane has got three processor, right? Three separate processor. So each individual processor is dedicated for this individual process. So I've got one processor dedicated for networking, one for security policies and rules that I write it, and one separately for your content ID inspection, right? So it detects your viruses, your anti-spyware, your threats that can be present in particular traffic. So it just need, I mean, why we say the single pass parallel processing, because it just need a single packet to determine whether, if the traffic has to be allowed. So the traffic has to be passed, right? Then this traffic goes through parallel processing, right? That means this particular traffic will be, going across multiple processors, and simultaneously you process, every processor will, process the simultaneous fields of a particular packet, and then allow this particular traffic if there is no harmful content present, right? So ensure that, I mean, you know the processing that it is called as single pass parallel processing as a feature. All right, so the next gen capabilities that it can provide is your content ID. Make sure you know this: application ID and user ID. So we will actually see, when the time comes up, we'll see what is the meaning of it. But ensure that content ID basically thinks about your, nature of threats or malicious content, like URL filtering. All those things are part of content ID. Your app ID is part of your application identity, like what applications you are, trying to reach, which websites you're trying to reach, whether you are, um, I mean, you can block a particular application not to access your inside network. So this is all about your layer 7 features that you do. User ID is all about maintaining, the right user, right? Based on the user role, the user, login reports, the user identities, authentication, captive portal. So all those things are part of your user ID. And we'll see everything, once the time comes up. All right, so this is one thing that I want to tell you. Next is your installation of your Palo Alto. So the next thing that I want to teach is installation. I think, Zubair, do you have a content for installation of Palo Alto in VMs or?
I mean, I have shared with them the OVA links,
Okay.
so they can install on workstation if they want.
Okay.
And the guys who have EVNG, they can
Okay.
use
So yeah, so
EVNG.
there are multiple ways that you can install. I mean, you can use VMware, you can also use GNS3 VM. Also, you can use EVENG for your practice, right? Now, Palo Alto, the most important thing is it is highly dependent on the licenses, right? So if you have a corporate partnership with Palo Alto, I mean, you get the eval licenses and you can practice it for 30 days. Otherwise, I mean, so when I do freelancing, I mean, I have the corporate licenses and I can, use it, but for generic trainings like that, I cannot go for license-based software, right? So I have to show you the unlicensed version of it. But yeah, there are multiple features that works good. I mean, it needs licenses to work good. Okay, the whole thing is